Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here in downtown Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on the 28th of September, last day of September, last weekend day here of September. A lot to cover here today. Obviously, we had major Cat 4 Hurricane Helene. Ironically, make landfall to almost the same spot as Aldalia did last year, which was a $3-5 billion damage storm. And then again, we had Debbie, Hurricane Debbie earlier back in August. And then again, pretty much the same area. Wenatchee, Perry, Florida, and the Panhandle just can't get a break here with three systems in a row here within the last year. Sadly, this one made a left turn rather than some of these go up the East Coast and then go out to sea like Debbie. So brought lots of flooding, but this one made more of a left turn and brought flooding to Atlanta and into the Tennessee and the Asheville, North Carolina area. So again, probably going to be well north of a $5 billion plus disaster at least. Again, I can see the eye moving right again across the. Fortunately, the Big Bend area is not a very populated area in terms of coastal impacts, but inland was just some epic flooding again all throughout parts of the southeast. Even our guy in Tennessee had some pretty historic flooding in his area there. So again, God bless everyone. Unfortunately, it was about 45 plus deaths, and that'll put it in history books. They will retire the name Helene, and it will not be used again because of the catastrophe and the number of deaths. We are currently right here, got about day 119 of the hurricane season, so we're going toward the tail end of the last couple months here, but again, we still have 2 months left, and unfortunately a very favorable climate cycle here, as MJO cycle is still very favorable for development in the Atlantic. So again, most of the metrics are kind of near average, slightly below average. Hurricanes are actually up above average, and the big thing is just we've had 4 landfalling hurricanes. That tropical storm, number 8, I think it was, they never really got a name. But again, so basically 5 systems that have impacted the U.S. this year. Less than 2 is average for the number of hurricanes. So again, in terms of landfalls and impacts to the U.S., certainly well above average. And these are just some of the locations, again, where these events have occurred. And the map underlying here is what we had projected a year ahead, thinking that Texas, Florida, and North Carolina would be the bullseyes. And pretty much that's where it's been so far this year. Hurricane Center is tracking 4 systems here, so we got a lot of activity out there. Isaac and Joyce will be fish storms. They won't impact us, but need to watch this one down in the Gulf. Again, same general area as Helene, and that would be named KIRK. So yours truly will see how big or that storm can be. And again, we're getting that would put us near average to above average for the season. Look at the 14-day storm track again. You can see with that area in the Southwest Caribbean, Western Gulf here where that could become a model's been hinting at how strong this will be. Again, right now they're not hinting at something too huge, but again, just as we learned from Helene, it can go from nothing to a Cat 4 in 2 days. So we need to watch this area. Again, that's why the Hurricane Center is watching the Southwest Caribbean and Western Gulf here in the next week or so. Severe weather season, again, not typical to kind of going flat line here for the rest of the year, but picked up some, obviously, with Helene. So tornado still going to be the record shattering here. So most in 13 years, top 13% of history. So very active, above average there. Hail actually down big time. And wind events, again, down 7% for last year, but still 14% above average. So still pretty active in terms of wind damage type events. Drought has been on a wild ride here. We peaked it in November of 2022 where we had 82% of the country in dry to drought phases. We plummeted to just 26% here back in June where it was very, very wet across the U.S., one of the least in decades for least drought. But now we've surged again here, up 73% of the country in dry to drought phases, map left. And you can see back on June 6th, virtually almost no drought across the country, so near historic lows. So gone from one extreme to the next. And unfortunately, this theme is going to be expanding drought in the western half of the country, probably into the plains and maybe the central Corn Belt, not maybe the western Corn Belt, central Corn Belt in 2025. So certainly drought and fires are going to be the theme for 2025. Speaking of wildfires here, again, we had projected to be the worst in 4 years. It's actually now upticked to the worst in 7 years. We have 32% above average in terms of acres burned. Again, so that's going all the way back to 2017 in terms of we had 42% above average. So again, we actually believe next year could even be worse, probably the worst in a decade, again, with developing drought in the western half of the country. Look at last week's summer here, week ending here today, here on 28th. Here in the U.S., it was 1.9 warmer than last year, number 1 hottest in 39 years. So again, a little bit misleading because, again, you got to be careful. It's cool there in the central U.S., but very, very hot west and, again, warm east. 73% wetter than last year, number 1 wettest in 39 years. So number 1 hottest, number 1 wettest. A lot of that wet, obviously, due to Helene. Cold spot, favorable spot for seasonal merchandise sales would be there in the UK, whereas coldest in 4 years, well below average and extremely wet. So cold, wet this time of year is good for fall merchandise sales. And again, we got some of that again here in the eastern U.S. as we look ahead here. Polar vortex is actually coming to life here as it does every year over the North Pole, and getting almost completely formed here as we get to the tail end of this period by middle October here. So again, something to watch. If it's ragged and weak, which we expect under this La Nina type cycle, get more frequent intrusions of cold air into the Canada, North America here. If it's strong like last year, it made one plunge last year mid-January, and that was about it, maybe mid-February, but it was just... So again, weaker event is what we want to see here if you like cold and snow here across North America. Look at this week again, getting into October here, kind of scary how fast the year's zipping by, 5 October. 1.3 cooler than last year, still second warmest in 39 years, but it's kind of a little bit of a tale of two halves, so we're going to be a little bit cooler here in the pockets of the east, northeast, mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, and then really, really hot out west. 28% drier than last year, driest in 18 years, still wet and soggy. We'll have to watch again, Texas, Houston area. There's a potential if that's one area where our next landfalling tropical system could happen. So we'll have to watch Texas again during this week. Neat site we just actually stumbled upon was explorefall.com. Kind of a very neat site if you want to track fall foliage here. Again, we're already about 2-3 weeks ahead of schedule here. In fact, our leaves are dropping and turning colors here big time here in eastern PA. So map left here, you can see again much more widespread in terms of moderate to high color versus this time last year, was just far northern New England. Last year where the drought was in the upper Midwest, again, they were way ahead of schedule. So drought can actually make your leaves fall sooner and sometimes be a little prettier. So it could be a nice fall. Just again, if you're going to go do your leaf peeping, probably a couple weeks in advance of what it was last year. Look at next week, a week prior to Columbus Day here. Again, cooler, tale of two halves. Again, well, it's 2.5 warmer nationally, warmest in 3 years, 10th warmest in 39. Don't tell the folks in the east, the coolest in 12 years in the east. So again, very cool here for us in the east, while the west still remains pretty hot. Rainfall pretty flat to last year, wettest in 3 years, 14th driest. And again, most of that precip will be from Texas into New England. And just aggregating these 2 weeks trends here, we generally think cooler trends up there in central Canada, north central Canada, eastern half of the third of the country, and then still very hot in the west. Europe looks good in terms of cool weather, and aggregating the precip trends here, again, we still see very, very wet conditions across Africa. So again, we've got to watch these systems. Again, we've got 2 months left of the hurricane season, and we're not out of the woods by any means. We still believe we're going to have at least one, probably 2 more hurricane landfalls in the U.S. So again, we are not out of the woods here. So let's hope it's not Florida, but because they don't want any more. But again, something to be mindful of. So with that, folks, I hope you have a great week ahead, and be safe out there. And God bless the folks cleaning up down there, and prayers for a speedy recovery. So that, folks, have a great week, and we will talk to you again this time next week.